maybe Trump is not a fascist, but he's giving strength to fascists to build in United States and also in Europe. As far as the Le Pen is concerned, we have to greet our friends and brothers in Paris today that they are demonstrating after 1 month of building a magnificent demonstration for the rights of the sans-papiers, the migrants without paper. Now they're facing the police there. This is the picture of resistance that exists everywhere, from Greece to the United States to Europe to Australia. There is mass resistance to fascism and racism. And this is a message that is coming from Greece, that we can defeat them. We defeated them, and the decision of a court is a historical decision. For us, we had 3 main targets. Golden Dawn is a criminal organization. We demanded life prison for the murderers of Pavlos Fyssias, the musician who was murdered in 2013 by Golden Dawn, a group who attacked him. And the third is never again fascism. All these 3 targets, it's very obvious that we can succeed them. The court decided already. We are waiting the next days how many years they will end in prison. There is already life prison for the murderer of Pavlos Fyssias. And in front of us is the fight to stop fascism. This was possible because on 7th of October, hundreds of thousands were outside the court after a call for a general strike. And for us, that was the way that the people who are fighting for their jobs, the people who are resisting for the climate crisis, the people who are in solidarity with the refugees, especially after the inferno in Moria, all these small rivers, they became a huge river outside the court, and they pushed the stamp on the decision of the court. And this was something that was built for years. For years, the anti-racist and the anti-fascist movement in Greece were fighting. When in 2012, the Nazis of Golden Dawn, they entered the parliament with 18 MPs, that was a shock in Greece and internationally, that real neo-Nazis stamping and murdering on the street to become a power of 7% in the Greek parliament. We stood against them with 3 main ways. The first way was by standing on the power of the working class movement. So in that in 2013, when they murdered Pavlos Fyssias, there was a call for general strike, and the general strike forced the neoliberal government to come to a crackdown against the neo-Nazis for the first time. This opened the process for the trial. The second is the united front tactic. We stand and we stood together with socialist, leftist, trade unionist, members of the LGBTQ movement, refugees, migrants, women. We stood all together to smash the neo-Nazis. This unity was very, very crucial. And the third is that we decided to prosecute the Nazi gang and to bring them to the court. All these 3 ways, they were really very important. So we had mass struggle and all the struggle, they escalated in the 7th of October. For us, this is not the end, because Trump, Salvini, and Le Pen, they're getting power because of the racist policies of the governments. Racism is the problem. Islamophobia is the problem. The closing of the borders in Evros River and in the Mediterranean Sea, that is drowning thousands of refugees is the problem. The building of prison in the Greek islands like Moria is the base why the fascists are coming again. So for us, we feel strong and feel confident that we can continue the struggle. This is not the end of the struggle. We never based ourselves on the neoliberal forces. Now in Greece, a lot of these kind of forces, they celebrate that we are the anti-fascists. The reality, these forces, and especially the neoliberal government of Greece, is guilty for racism, and racism opened the way for the fascists. And the problem is still in front of us. So we have to unite our forces. We have to stand together internationally to say no to Europe fortress, to say open the border, refugees are welcome everywhere. So movements like what's happening now in Germany, where they demand that the refugees from Moria are welcome there. Movements like that in Austria, where they managed to put the influence of the Freedom Party really at the margin in the elections for the Vienna municipality. They were defeated. So this kind of movements are very important. On 26th of June in Greece, we had a demonstration under the slogan, Black Lives Matter, Refugee Lives Matter. For us, the unity with the movement in the United States is very important. We don't know what's going to happen in the elections in the United States, but we know that this mass movement is an inspiration of all of us. So I would say that in the period of pandemic and of COVID,
can you sum up, please?
In this period, the governments and the bosses are trying to escape by scapegoating the migrants and the refugees. In Greece, they're closing the camp where there are the refugees because of the pandemic. They're put in quarantine. So for us, it's very important to stand together, to fight them. And the victory in Greece is a victory of all the anti-fascist and all the anti-racist movement internationally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Petros. That was a brilliant start to the meeting, and I think it very much sets the tone of the victories that we can have in the battles ahead of us. I'm going to bring in our next speaker, Mohammed Kozbar, who is in, I'm not quite sure if he's actually here. Okay, okay, hopefully Mohammed will join soon. Instead of Mohammed, I'm going to bring in Louise Raw, who is an author and an activist. So Louise, if you go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Petros, it's such an honor, honestly, to speak on the same virtual panel as you. Thank you so much for your success in Greece. It wasn't just amazing in its own self, but it means so much to all of us as well. It gives us hearts, and my God, we need that these days. The first time, Petros, that I was aware of the Golden Dawn spokesman, Ilias Kastidaris, was when he assaulted two women from left-wing parties live on television. Absolutely astonishing. For those who don't remember it or didn't see it, threw water in one woman's face and hit hard in the face another woman 3 times. He was 27 years younger than her. He's a bodybuilder and a martial arts expert. Do you think he was condemned for that? No, he wasn't kicked out of Golden Dawn. He got off in courts and he got a lot of praise. Unbelievably, he got a lot of praise. And I think we need to talk about fascists and women. Particularly, it's something that rarely gets discussed as a specific, but I don't know, I'm starting to think the old fascists don't like women very much. I mean, bear with me, hear me out. You know, I could be wrong. They say they do, don't they? They say they are the great protectors of our women and girls. And by the way, I've cracked their brilliant code. By our women, they mean white women. I know, amazing. When they say our women, they always mean women of their own country. But in fact, women are hugely at risk from fascists on the home front as well. I work with an organisation that works with domestic violence victims called the Freedom Programme. And they have said to me, when you have a fascist presence in a town, this is in the UK, we guarantee high rates of domestic violence and violence against children. These people are wedded to violence. So even if you're white, even if you're far right yourself, if you're a woman, you are not safe from these bastards. It's the same with far right terrorist incidents. Whenever you hear of one and you hear there's a massacre on one site and then you hear another body was found at a different location, well, then you think wife or mother, because that's what it always is. They start practicing their terrorism at home. The high rates of fascists in prison in this country for rape and child rape and domestic violence are quite astonishing, given they claim to be the ones that are against paedophilia. In the UK, our government, our extreme right government, does not care about this. Domestic violence services are cut to the bone. Women are dying in incredibly high numbers. And of course, they're locked down with these bastards. Women are having to live with these people in quarantine with no escape. But it's an international picture too, of course. It's personal and it's also on a much broader scale. Far-right governments now are explicitly attacking women for being women and for being anything which looks like feminists in a way that's relatively new, not just in the old Nazi race motherhood way. We're familiar with that, you know, children and kitchen is your role. Of course, they are still doing that as well. A little shout out to Hungary, where you can get tax breaks if you bear enough Hungarian babies. If you have 4 or more, you get a car, you get help buying a car. I don't know if that goes up incrementally, like over 6, do you get an SUV? You know, if you have 9 kids, do you get an articulated lorry? I don't know if the size of the vehicle goes up with the family. But in Spain, we're seeing something new as well with the party Vox. They campaigned explicitly on an anti-feminist ticket. Really loud and proud about that, and my God, they did well on it, and many of their supporters are young men. It really is incredibly troubling. In Poland, we've had women sacked for participating in legitimate, peaceful demonstrations, feminist demonstrations. We've had domestic violence organizations raided and shut down by the state. Files and computers seized. Now, what does that mean? That means if you're a woman who's given very personal information about the violence and abuse and perhaps rape you've suffered, which is very hard to do. I've had to do it. Many women listening to this will be domestic violence survivors. Those files have now been taken by the police. You don't know who's reading your personal stuff. Your ex could be a policeman, could be a state official. It's appalling. I want to see international solidarity being extended to women who suffer this sort of thing in the same way that we would do with racist or Islamophobic abuse. Those women in Poland now feel so vulnerable, they won't go to domestic violence services. So they're staying in violent relationships and they're dying in violent relationships. In America, the far right, we know, has been recruiting and radicalizing these delightful chaps called incels, men's rights activists, you know, sad, inadequate white blokes who are blaming everything and everyone for their own failure in life and in relationships apart from themselves. It's turned really murderous over there. We've had, by my count, around 30 people murdered explicitly by incels who've been radicalized by fascists and who are saying racist messages as well as anti-woman messages. And it's scarcely talked about. It isn't talked about nearly enough. So we know that women are targeted by fascists because they are part of other groups that the fascists don't like. And my God, who do fascists like? You know, not even each other often. So women get targeted because they're Black, because they're Asian, because they're LGBT, because they're travelers, because they're disabled, because they're Muslim, but also now explicitly because they're women. So we need a response to that. We need a specific response. We need to be saying, and loudly.
Thank you so much, Louise.
Yeah, we need to say that we're standing up to racism, but also Islamophobia and also homophobia and also misogyny. I think that's really important that we now include that in everything we say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise. I am going to bring in our next speaker, who I somewhat already introduced, but we'll do it again. Mohammed Kozbar, who is from Finsbury Park Mosque. He's a chairperson. So, Mohammed, you have 4 minutes, and I will somewhat, I will in like the most politeful manner interrupt when you need to sum up. So, Mohammed, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'd like to start with thanking Stand Up to Racism for this opportunity. And I think we all agree with me that racism, and in particular, Islamophobia on the rise, no doubt about that. But I think this is not the main issue and the main problem at the moment. The main problem we are facing is normalizing racism and in particular Islamophobia. It's been normalized in the within the far right groups. It's been normalized now within the media. even within the politicians. We've seen politicians like Trump, like Johnson, like Macron, and others in Europe speaking about especially Muslims in a very negative way, which will affect eventually, will affect the racism in general and Islamophobia. It will increase the Islamophobia in Europe, and this is what we've seen so far. President like Macron yesterday, after this horrific attack in Paris yesterday, he blamed Muslims. He blamed Islamist terrorists behind this incident. For example, imagine if we blame Christian for what this criminal did in Christchurch, for example, and we call it Christian terrorist. Imagine if we call what this Jewish settler did in West Bank when he burned a family, Palestinian family in West Bank while they are sleeping, a Jewish terrorist. Imagine if we said that what the Serbian did to Bosnia and to Srebrenica when they killed thousands of people, we call them Orthodox terrorists. Imagine if in Myanmar and in Burma we called those who killed thousands of people and burned them, innocent people, Muslims, we call them Buddhist terrorists. This is not acceptable. Linking terrorism with any group or any religion is not acceptable. As it is not acceptable for all religion, it shouldn't be acceptable for us as Muslims. It is not in my name. What that person did yesterday is not in my name, it's not in my religion name, and I'm not responsible for that. And it should be clear. But unfortunately, people like Macron, who are trying to gain support from the far right, trying to inflame the situation in not just in only, it won't affect only France, it will affect everybody in Europe, and blame certain community for that. He did it yesterday and he did it before, unfortunately. And we've seen the type of Trump and others. And these politicians who are supposed to be in center right, now they are going to the far right side. And the problem is that they are teamed up with people like, and dictators like Mohammed bin Zayed, MBS, MBZ, bin Salman, and Sisi.
Please sum up, Mohammed.
Who are dictators and torture and trying to torture their citizens and prevent any democratical system in these countries. Therefore, I think now it is the time for us to unite, as it is from the title of that session, to unite as a movement and to coordinate our efforts to fight racism wherever they are. It's not acceptable anymore that any group being attacked and being left by itself to fight by itself. It is the time for us to coordinate and take our movement a step forward in the near future. Otherwise, we will the far right will keep organized better than us and keep attacking us one by one. I'll finish here.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, and that was perfect timing. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Like I haven't mentioned before, but the fight against the far right and the fight against racism is not just here, but it's across the world. And this is an international conference, so we are very lucky to have international speaker. So I'm going to bring in Ramzi. I hope I said it right. He's from Germany. He's a part of the Linke and the Social Democratic Students Association, and is also active in the Black Lives Matter movement. So yeah, they're very active. You're going to have 4 minutes, and after 3 minutes, I will let you know to sum up. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Speaking about the situation in Germany, we have to be very clear that there's a strong organized right in the so-called deep state, basically in the police, in the army, There are many terror groups, and there have been a lot of murders. The NSU process is one of them. It's a nationalist, socialist underground organization which killed many migrants years ago. But in the last months and years, there have been other murders as well by right-wing terrorists, for example, in Halle in 2019, and then Hanau in the beginning of 2020. And this has triggered an organization which is called Migrantifa. It's an anti-fascist migrant organization, basically BIPOCs, POCs, who are organizing against these phenomena in Germany, because they seem to not be convinced that the German left also has the capacities and also the anti-racist standing to fight for them. So we have this phenomena in different contexts. It's not only Migrantifa, but there's a very strong migrant and BIPOC self-organizing out of typical leftist contexts, which are more white German dominated. And these groups have also organized many of the protests in Germany, which have taken place in response to George Floyd's murder in the US and the Black Lives Matter movement. And the protests have been huge actually in Germany. There have been, like, on 6th of June, there have been 100,000 to 200,000 people on the streets in all of Germany, which was really a lot and had a huge impact, even though it was Corona restricted and so on. So we see that there's a really huge anti-racist movement from below, but the parties, also Die Linke, weren't very present and have to be more present. And this is a challenge definitely for the future. We are also working in these kinds of contexts, but there's a huge shift still between these self-organized POC groups and the traditional left in Germany. So yeah, that's the challenge ahead, and we're trying to combine these forces more and more. And the party question. Okay, one last minute, then one last thing. As you all know, probably the Alternative für Deutschland, AfD, is the main right-wing party in Germany, which had huge election victories and has a neo-fascist wing inside. But it by now broke down a lot due to its response to the coronavirus and the pandemic, which was not very strong, and they couldn't really use racism as a card there effectively, and also this anti-racist movement from below. So yeah, these are pretty good developments, but it has to go on. Of course, the struggle goes on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramzi. Yeah, very much. The struggle goes on, and the fight and resistance goes on. And yeah, and this conference today is a part of that. So our next speaker is Virgil Bitu, I hope I said your surname right, who is a Gypsy, a Roman traveller community activist. And you have 4 minutes, and I will give you a, I will pop in at 3 minutes to let you know you have 1 minute. So go ahead, Virgil.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, good. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the ultimate hate crime. which is the anti-gypsy. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Roma, gypsies, and travelers have been one of the most discriminated and abused groups. We've been demonized as COVID spreaders or infected people. On the other hand, the authorities across Europe made a disproportionate resource allocation for our community members. Special design programs for this period have been implemented, haven't been implemented in our communities, but we benefited of a concentrated resources allocation from the enforcement institutions as police, gendarmerie, army. Abuses in Roma, Gypsy, and traveler communities across Europe happen almost daily in the period March-July 2020. But for the majority of these abuses, nobody have been held accountable, nor by authorities, nor by mass media, nor by general society, and with few exceptions, not even by us, human rights activists. Anti-Gypsyism is the ultimate form of hate crime, which is the most accepted and most tolerated form of hate crime in our societies. In any other case of hate crimes as racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, misogynism, we get reactions from authorities, mass media, civil society, but not in case of anti-Gypsyism. We, Western democratic society, the so-called modern civilizations based on civil rights, are condemning the Indian society based on caste system. Here is the same. Roma, Gypsy, and travelers are considered a lower caste, second-class citizens. The public services, or not even the legislation, are implemented in as it should be in our communities. During the years, we have been subject of multiple social stages and programs: slavery, extermination, exclusion, assimilation, and most recently, social inclusion. Even social inclusion sounds like a perfect solution. It seems that it is not working because all programs are designed by others for us. We have no representation. This is also the reason of anti-Gypsyism being the most tolerated hate crimes in our societies. We need a better representation. We need a better representation at in political level. We need a better representation in executive level. We need people who trigger the existing system of legislation and public relation. A big problem in the case that political parties are not open or interested to work with us, which is the difference between the Conservative Party, of which members are famous for anti-Gypsy declaration and attitudes, and the Labour Party, who doesn't have any reaction. So I may say that the anti-Gypsy in UK is either expressed, either tolerated. So you cannot do things for us without us. Until we have people, politicians, who will stand with us, by us, we cannot engage in a fair fight against anti-Gypsyism. We cannot stand against people like Trump, Salvini, Le Pen, Boris Johnson. We have only the social media and the streets in our fight, which is not enough. So we are asking for people to support a better Roma, Gypsy, and traveler representation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was amazing timing. So we have, I was just to the comment, which has gone up, but it was Sarah Cox saying that Priti Patel must be held accountable for her attack on the Gypsy, Roma, and traveller community. So our next speaker is David Landau, who is part of the Jewish Socialist group. David, you have 4 minutes, so go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, we're hearing about, despite some tremendous resistance, we're seeing a global nightmare of wave of fascist and far-right populism spreading across Europe, the US, and other parts of the world. In some cases, taking hold of the state. In the case of Trump, and the case also of Viktor Orban in Hungary. Viktor Orban is is also, amongst other things, a fierce opponent of Roma people, but also an anti-Semite, using tropes around Soros to justify that. But what we're seeing here is not just a set of ideas, an ideology. It's emotionally charged. It's full of hatred, and that charge is very powerful. So where does this come from? I hazard a guess, but it's a feature of humanity that we all have a yearning for a sense of belonging. After all, we are socialists. If we are socialists, we recognize this in the all-important idea of solidarity. And for those here who may be Marxist, you will know that cooperation, common activity and purpose between people is the root of surplus value and profit, as well as the force which can potentially tear down the capitalist system. So this yearning for belonging is pretty damned important. But in itself, it can be a terrible thing, because when things fall apart, communities disintegrate and so forth, people search for a sense of belonging, and they might do this by gathering around the flags of nation and race. And it's at times like just now that we can see this happening. I believe that this analysis makes community organization against racism and fascism extremely important. Community organization can at least speak to that yearning and help build an inclusive solidarity rather than an exclusive force. Also, our enemies operate at the local level. When we hear today of the kind of attacks that have taken place, we can see the dire necessity and the duty of organizing at a local level to protect people and to encourage a grassroots movement. I've been involved in two such projects, Islington Anti-Racist, Anti-Fascist Action in the 80s and 90s, and Redbridge and Epping Forest together between 2004 and 2012, focused against BNP, who had councillors there. These were not without faults, but they achieved a lot in terms of driving out the fascists and defending families on estates from racist attacks. Building such a group doesn't have to be on one flag, under one flag, say stand up to racism, but it needs to be a flag which you can get all sorts of forces around. Trades Council.
1 minute, David.
Okay, Trades Council, Labour Party, and also maybe organisations who don't work together very well nationally, but will around a local problem like fascism on the ground. So people in Antifa and Hope Not Hate can be involved in these local organisations together, and hopefully cooperation at that level can bubble up into better relations at national and international level. Local movements need to address state racism in their localities too. For example, stopping anti-immigration raids. Clearly, we need international organisation. Today's conference is a step towards this, and I might take the opportunity to give a plug for the No Passerang conference against racism and fascism, which will be taking place in Berlin in 2021, which I hope Stand Up to Racism will take part and have a voice. But the international, local, and so on needs to be driven by grassroots movement of resistance across the world. They shall not pass.
Thank you, David. Very much so. They shall not pass. Our last speaker is Michael Bradley, who is from Stand Up to Racism and is a national organiser. So, Michael, you have 4 minutes, and like the others, I will interrupt you at 3. So, go ahead, Michael.
Cool. I mean, we're obviously living through a period at the moment of massive political polarisation. There are clear echoes of the 1930s in the growth of the far right and in the response to them. And what we're experiencing is an interplay between racist populism taken on by supposedly mainstream political figures, you know, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, other people and stuff over it, and and fascist movements themselves. Now, not every racist populist is a fascist and stuff over it, but actually, what racist populism is doing is open the door to the fascists. Fascism itself uses racism. It can use different tactics like electoralism and the rest of it, but at the heart of it is an attempt to do what the likes of Golden Dawn did, to try to get people, a movement onto the streets, to break the left, to target minorities, and the rest of it. But what we're experiencing really has been a almost systematic attempt by supposedly mainstream politicians to give legitimacy to what the far right is doing. I mean, there are obvious examples, isn't there? Trump talking about the good people on the demonstrations at Charlottesville, or telling the Proud Boys to stand by. Boris Johnson talking about the need to come out and defend the statue of Winston Churchill and stuff during the heart of the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff are examples with this. And Steve and other people raised the idea of the conspiracy theorists, QAnon and other theories. These again, the kind of flirtation with Trump with QAnon as a theory is again a way of, you know, kind of giving the nod and a wink and stuff in lots of ways. And actually, despite the fact that a number of far right groups haven't done well during lockdown and COVID, these kind of conspiracy theories and the anti-lockdown protests give them an opportunity to regroup and to build support. I think that obviously everybody on this call will have been inspired by what happened in Greece and the success against Golden Dawn. I think that when we talk about Stand Up to Racism, or we talk about KEERFA, or we talk about other organisations internationally that are working together, we are talking about bringing together broad-based anti-racist movements that bring in together the trade unions, campaign groups, the left, faith organisations and the rest of it, that campaign vociferously against state racism, that campaign that make propaganda against racism, but also are prepared to confront and marginalise the far right and stuff. And we've obviously seen the result in Greece. We've seen a brilliant result just in the last couple of days in Vienna. Stuff with the far right's vote being driven back, but also, you know, in this country we've experienced Stand Up to Racism at the heart of marginalising Tommy Robinson, the DFLA, the FLA, and over the last years and stuff, we've seen anti-racist movements like the Anti-Nazi League and Unite Against Fascism mobilise against the National Front, the BNP, and the English Defence League really successfully. This is a good model of how to bring people together, to work together with different parts of the movement and stuff, cooperating and combining and stuff, but effectively being able to take up a broad-based anti-racist initiative, but also to tackle the far right, to marginalise the far right, and where necessary to confront them.
You have 1
It's
minute.
the last thing really. There's no room for complacency, no matter what the victories are, because we know that the far right will continue, and the fascist right will continue to try to grow. We know that even when they're marginalised, they can turn to terror and the rest of it. And therefore, we want to develop this strategy on an international basis. When we talk about the way the anti-racist movement combines and works together around the period of the next upcoming US election, but also around UN Anti-Racism Day in next March, that's vital. We need an international movement against racism. We need an international movement against fascism. We need to learn the lessons from one another. And there is a massive lesson to learn from what KEERFA and the anti-racist movement have done in Greece to marginalise and defeat Golden Dawn.
Thank you so much, Michael.